It's Scale School time, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back for another episode. We're going to be diving into the new frontier of blockchain and crypto, confidential tokens, X402, and everything else in between. As always, with me this week, we have the man, the protector, the bearded green arrow, Mr. Sawyer. How you doing, man?
Good. How are you?
Good.
That's an interesting, interesting intro. Since when am I the bearded green arrow?
You've always been the green arrow.
Is this because I look like Stephen Amell?
Yeah.
It's like one of the best compliments you could ever give me.
I know.
Quite honestly, there's very few male actors that I looked like, and he's one of them. So thank you.
Well, after what I put you through 10 minutes ago, I've got to be nice to you. And our special guest this week returning. This might be the first time anyone's ever returned to Scale School. Alexander, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. I guess, it's an auspicious occasion. I get to come back again.
Fun fact, I actually think you were our first guest on Scale School. Or at least our new version of Scale School. Technically, yes. Scale School predates our Twitter StreamYard thing, as well as technically, you joining us. But you were the first one who joined us for our new version, which you set the stage because, following in your footsteps has been very hard for a lot of people, I think.
Well, I appreciate that. That's a high compliment coming from you.
Thank you. Just compliments flying today. This is very rare for us guys. Usually we're
you're going to leave totally fluffed up. You're going to be totally, this day is going to be the greatest of your life.
My tires are way too big right now. We got to deflate these things. So let's get right into things, I guess. The agentic economy. Okay. I know we talk about it a lot. I know there's a lot of buzzwords, and I know there's days where we all kind of sit there and think probably is this protocol really going to be it? Is this really going to be the thing? And I go back and forth all the time. I'm a very indecisive person, but I think the one thing that I am feeling very optimistic and confident about is there are more and more people and real companies coming and building. And I wrote this in my weekly wrap up on, I don't know, Friday or whenever I posted last week. I've been late a lot recently. My bad. Wife says I'm chronically late. Anyways, I think when new technology is being built, it's really exciting when you've got all these, builders that come in. But the thing that actually moves the needle is when the real companies come in, because the real companies are the teams that get to invest capital and resources and invest, and they already have distribution, right? It's amazing that we have all these indie developers and hackers that want to come in and try things. They get things started. But what actually moves the needle, in my opinion, is the big businesses coming in and saying, we want to be a part of this. And, in 50 minutes, there's an 8,004 launch day thing. And if you haven't seen the speaker lineup, it's stacked. It's half Google DeepMind people. And so I just think, again, high level to kind of kick things off here, I'm just really pumped to see the concept of agentic commerce, the agentic economy is really feeling good. Feel like we're moving in the right direction. Again, protocols aside, tools aside, that's all going to constantly change. It's just the way tech goes. But I think the concept of what we're all aiming and driving toward feels like it's truly at feels like we're kind of in, maybe not the crossing the chasm point, but the chasm's maybe in sight. Is that fair?
I'd say so. I think we're in a position now where the dust is kind of settling, and people are going to be making real use cases. So they see not only the potential in the longer kind of case, but also the pain points that the short-term choices have made. And it's always a trade-off. You can never know the future, which is kind of just reality of engineering. But these are kind of the interesting points where the kind of, I don't want to say the real work gets done, but some of the definitely less sexy work gets done.
Fair enough. So I like that a lot. There's kind of two key topics I want to talk about today. And they're very different, but they have a key crossover. One of them is Fairmeter, which Fairmeter is, I know kind of your baby. You've driven this thing from scratch, and I, as a much worse SDK creator, know that building SDKs that actually work is really hard. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. I know you guys have had a couple of really exciting releases. You guys have, I think we just saw today or yesterday, we finally saw the EIP 2612 any token get integrated into Coinbase. So we're starting to finally see some new schemes and extensions and plugins to export to, which I think is really exciting. And obviously, you guys are one of the only, I think at this point, maybe 3 full end-to-end implementations outside of the Coinbase official Coinbase repo. I think the only other one, if I'm not mistaken, that is full end-to-end like you guys is Daydreams. I think Third Web has pieces, but I don't think they're as full featured, if I'm not mistaken. And then on the flip side, we're also going to be talking about confidentiality, which I believe we actually touched on briefly when you joined us last time, but we've made some strides on our side, and I've got some exciting updates to share as well. Falcor, you have like a coin or something we can flip? I don't know where to start.
How about this? Okay, got a number in my head.
This is going to take way too long.
If you're within 5, it's confidential. If you're not, it's the other one. Go.
5?
No, it was 7, but you're within 5, so confidential. Start there.
That's just not how we pick numbers in the United States, but that's okay. Normally, it's like pick the closest number, and it's like both people. I digress. It's all right. We learn something new every day. All right, let's talk about confidential tokens, and then this is gonna be a good segue, I think, into Fairmeter, because in order to make technology like this work, we need ways to consume it. So one of our long lagging maybe issues with blockchain is the lack of privacy, or maybe not lack of, but it's this split around, like, some people love the fact that every transaction is public and some people hate it. And our argument is going all the way down into the rabbit hole of privacy is a very fine line, right? There's a lot of things that are just unknowns right now in regards to, legal compliance, getting big businesses to use it, right? We don't know. And they're still trying to figure it out. There's governments trying to figure it out, right? And so while we go through all of these questionable things, one thing that we do know for a fact is that everyday people, everyday agents, everyday enterprises all want generally the same thing, which is they tend to want what they already have. If you have a credit card, if you have a debit card, if you have a bank account, if you have cash, right? Like if you have any traditional fiat payment method, when you go and make a payment at a coffee shop, a bookstore, Amazon, whatever your chosen way to spend money is in your local country and currency, the person you're spending the money with can only see a small amount of information. Usually they can see like the last 4 digits of the credit card, or they can see, the last maybe a couple digits of the bank account or whatever. Maybe they can see your name. They can see obviously what you ordered or buying or consuming, whatever. Timestamp, stuff like that, the amount. They can't see what your last pay stub was. They can't see if you went and put money into a brokerage firm or into a centralized exchange for crypto. They can't see all this information, right? They can't see into your bank account. They can't see your life. They can't see all the other things you purchased. Falcor, Mr. Student.
I do not know if you saw this, but over the weekend, 7 major banks in the UK had a glitch. You could see everybody's transactions for
no way.
2 days. Yeah.
Wow.
Bro, it was and I think there's a massive case study to be seen there. Like, I don't know. I think you get the actual information and stuff, but yeah, how that was end of the world type stuff,
Yeah, it's not ideal. It's not ideal. But I mean, to kind of wrap this up, and then we'll get some thoughts from around the tiles here. Confidentiality is just something. Again, we've kind of coined this benchmark, the barista test, but confidentiality is just one of these things where it is kind of a societal expectation when it comes to your finances these days. And obviously, like, again, not everyone in the world has access to those things. And obviously, in those situations, maybe it's not yet a societal expectation for them. Obviously, we hope it will be, because I do personally believe that everyone deserves their own form of financial freedom. My personal opinion is everyone should be able to attain the level of financial freedom they want. If you want to debank yourself and like go hardcore, like by all means, go do that. Me personally, I'm not into that so much. And so I just want, when I'm doing things on chain to be the same level as, when I'm spending money in the real world. And more so these days, I've started giving agents wallets and experimenting. And it's kind of hard because I have to be very strategic about how I'm funding these agents, because it's not that I have anything to hide on chain, but it's like, what if one day, I do wind up with like a really nice win on a DeFi play. Like, I don't want all these wallets linked to something that could happen in the future, right? That's just not ideal. And so, full disclosure, I really don't use DeFi too much. I'm terrible at it. I'm a chronic loser. But you get the idea, right? Like, this is the level of expectation I want, and what I also believe that agents need, right? As they're moving money and making decisions, and people are putting them into like business positions. If you've seen like Paperclip, right? Like, you can run a full company of agents. If you're giving them money and spending limits, like, do you want everyone to see where that money's attached to, or at least maybe not what it's attached to, but how much they're spending? I digress. Falcor, Alexander, Guy, thoughts?
I mean, I agree completely. I don't have anything really interesting to add on top of that besides saying that, like, I think as more and more people move onto the platforms that, existing systems have given more open data about transactions moving around, I think that's a hidden surprise for a lot of people that aren't used to crypto and aren't used to the space. So I think giving them an option is actually a really great thing, especially, like you said, in the scope of being able to at least, keep some control of your private information relative to who you're paying and what you're paying for and that type of thing.
Fair enough. Going down that train of thought further a little bit, let's actually talk tech. So privacy on chain is a very nuanced topic. There's obviously a lot of privacy protocols that have existed and privacy tokens. And we do our best on this show to, again, we want to be able to talk about it, but obviously there's a lot of, there's a lot of stuff out there that is better left not discussed. And so, I think at a very high level, the probably two most well-known privacy tokens, at least from my knowledge, are Zcash, which is kind of going through its renaissance era these last 6 months, and Monero. I really don't know how Zcash is doing it, because I feel like it's kind of pretty much the same thing from like a high level usage perspective. And I feel like Monero got blocked everywhere. So don't really know how Zcash is going through this, but like, hey, good for them. I actually met, it was cool. I got to meet some of the developers from behind like the cryptographic side of their protocol at a conference last year. And man, those guys are smart. Like, I'm not even going to try to talk about what they're doing because I don't understand it. And that's okay. That's why they're them and me. But what I really kind of like about at least what's happening there is we're seeing, we had Near on a couple weeks ago, and they gave a pretty cool talk about their Near intents and what they're doing. And, we've seen them be one of the drivers behind Zcash adoption. And again, that's kind of cool, right? Like, we're seeing them and Solana and some other blockchains kind of lean into that. But there's still this weird, like, I think there's still this question about, does it work for an actual business? Like, if I get paid in it or I want to pay someone, can I really use it? And I think so far, for most of the teams I'm talking to, the answer is absolutely not. It just doesn't really have that viability in your traditional business world. And so, one of the things we've been kind of working on at SKALE with our Byte protocol is what we call confidential tokens. So we have encrypted transactions live right now on our SKALE base chain. Conditional transactions, we had a really amazing hackathon about, or within our hackathon a few weeks back. Got a ton of great builders exploring different primitives with DeFi and gaming and AI using those. And now, we've kind of taken all these pieces together. And we've realized that we can create what we call a confidential token. What is a confidential token? Well, it allows us to retain a higher level of confidentiality than you get traditionally with a blockchain, while not necessarily going all this way to like full-blown, everything's private. It has a greater chance of being incompliant. Obviously, again, something we're still kind of testing in the field. And the way we do that is through encryption within consensus. So similar to you could think about how Zcash does it. Zcash does it at the protocol level. It is a cryptographic token. The entire chain is using zero knowledge proofs and cryptography to make every transfer shielded. We do something similar, but we don't use zero knowledge proofs. We actually use BLS threshold encryption, which is what our core consensus at SKALE uses, which allows multiple parties to come together and say, we're going to encrypt this with a shared key, and only if the majority of us agree do we have the ability to actually decrypt it. Now, where things get really cool is our incredible engineering team has also come up with a third new Byte protocol primitive, which we call re-encryption. Re-encryption is really important because it solves this in-between phase of what happens when we want to decrypt something and then re-encrypt it. And historically, in blockchain and maybe even outside, you've probably really only heard of this come up in the form of fully homomorphic encryption, which is where we basically do mathematics and changes on top of encrypted data. The problem, it's really freaking expensive. And it's really slow and requires a lot of power. And the only team that's really has an implementation in production right now is Zama. And they're only on Ethereum. That doesn't really work for everyone else. And so what we've been able to do is take all these kind of core primitives, bring them together and create a confidential token standard, which actually allows us to, let's say, I've got X USDC, I can actually deposit and encrypt that USDC. And once it's encrypted, the balance is now shielded. It's now as I'm sending between, Falcor and Guy and all these other people, they can move assets around as well. And it stays fully shielded, balance and amount. All that happens by, the validators are doing that work. And the key here is we can actually see who's sending money to who. We just can't see how much or what their balances are. So again, if I'm standing in the Starbucks and I'm ordering and Falcor's in line behind me, he knows that I'm paying Starbucks, right? However, he doesn't necessarily see how much I'm paying, right? Unless he's peeking over my shoulder, which could happen. But I hope that's not happening. My Starbucks order could be very embarrassing. But again, coming back to this, right? We have
how many pumps of caramel do you get?
I drink my coffee in espresso black. Sorry.
Yeah, he wants to keip that private at all costs.
Yeah.
I'm more of a vanilla guy. Anyways, right. So what's just really interesting is it's a unique way to now look at making tokens a step more toward this confidentiality, but where it actually is realistic for businesses. And part of what makes this realistic is the encrypted data, because it can be re-encrypted, we can create viewer keys, right? So for example, let's say Falcor and I are moving money back and forth and, I'm a business and a government entity says, hey, I need to see your books to see what you've done here because of XYZ reason. I need to be compliant. What do? They give me a key. I give them view access only to my transactions. Do I want to do that? Probably not. Do I have to do that to maintain compliance? Most likely. And therefore, that is a key part of, kind of a problem. So I digress. That's the basics of our confidential token technology. We're going to have a lot more coming out over the next 3 to 4 weeks on that. Demos, documentation, information. But wanted to kind of give a quick intro here, a little bit of alpha for you on what's coming. obviously, again, our goal here is to talk more about agentic commerce. And curious, I guess, Guy, from your perspective, hearing this, how do you see this, potentially impacting enterprises and stablecoins, impacting agentic commerce? What does this make you think about Parameter as well, and Corbits, and how you guys are approaching money?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really interesting question, right? So one of the things that we did with Farameter was we kind of got this feeling really early on that having centralized schemes and centralized chain interactions was going to be just a complete bottleneck, and so we didn't do it that way. What we did with Farameter is we started with a plugin approach, kind of day zero, right? And what this lets you do is it lets you take the stuff you're talking about, which is this really kind of strong perspective on how to do something, but also extremely flexible, and allow people to experiment with it without requiring consensus from everyone involved in X402, if that makes sense, right? And that's a huge thing, because the problem is if you are trying to go ask for, let's say, a foundation to allow you to have this new standard, then all of a sudden you're going to be battling it out with everyone else who's got some type of skin in the game on making sure it goes one way or the other way or whatever, right? So if you wanted to do something like this with Farameter, the really cool thing is you literally publish a plugin that worked as a payment handler and a facilitator handler. And anybody who wanted to support this could just basically turn it on for any chain that they cared about or any chain you wanted to implement this, which is really a huge benefit for these kind of like edge case like improvements, these like things that aren't like maybe mainstream figured out yet, but are definitely on the edge. It also means you can execute a lot quicker. So it's like, you're not going to wait for permission in order to be able to say, look, we have this new capability we've added. We'd love people to start using it. And then you let the market kind of go, oh, this is amazing. Let's integrate this into everything we do, right? So that's a big philosophical break from the rest of the X402 community for us. And that's very intentional. And I wouldn't say it's been hard, because it's very easy to do, like architecturally, but it has been like swimming upstream a bit with everyone involved. That said, I still think to this day, after, almost a year of working on this stuff, that it was the right choice. And it's great for exactly what you're talking about, because it means that you and I could sit down and maybe over, a 6-pack of beers, implement this fully and get it deployed in production, right? Take the work you've done and make it work, which is really a benefit. I mean, it's huge. So
heck yeah. No, I love it. I love it. That's one of my, right. Like, I think where it gets really interesting, and I think this is why I think Farameter will be really big for this, is when you start to introduce privacy to tokens on the EVM, something has to give. It's really unfortunate. Like, whether you're going all the way down the rabbit hole again of like ads tech, right? They're like hardcore privacy, or you are looking at like a Zama, or you're looking even at what we're doing. There's always one or two things that just don't exactly work, and that's just due to how the EVM interprets information. If you look at something like Zama, what breaks their ERC20 compatibility is they pass in, encrypted amount fields to the transfer, as that breaks the ERC20 transfer function signature. For us, one of the things that we do is we do it as essentially a callback. So our conditional transaction functionality is actually, if you're familiar with Chainlink, Chainlink uses a callback for most of its on-chain rights. So you make a request to Chainlink in your transaction, and then in some subsequent block thereafter, there's a special function that the Chainlink adapter has write access to, and their Oracle system is allowed to write to your contract, which then executes some functionality with the Chainlink value. That's actually how Chainlink primarily operates. Our conditional transaction technology works. So you'll notice I'm saying conditional transaction, not confidential. That's because, again, confidential tokens require other components to actually be implemented. And so the way that we do this is through, again, this callback. And so how it works is I submit an encrypted transaction to SKALE. As part of that, I have encrypted values that get stored on chain for one block. And I submit a conditional transaction, which we call a CTX. And a conditional transaction, to break that down into layman's terms, is basically an on-chain trigger. So in this case, it's an immediate trigger, i.e., I want to send a transfer right away. However, I need the validators to work together and be able to decrypt this at the right point in time to then execute. So again, we use our CTX technology, which is already built to do this. So I submit the CTX on chain, and then what happens is at the start of the next block, it automatically will go through consensus and then decrypt and then execute. Now, where it gets cool with our confidential token specifically, I know I'm throwing out a lot of buzzwords here, is you then get to re-encrypt it in the same block. So the balances stay shielded, the amounts stay shielded, nothing is leaked out. And so that is where it's going to be, I think Farameter will be really, really great for Scale's confidential token because it's not all in one block. So if we think about an X402 transaction, we're actually waiting for settlement and we're waiting for verification. And in most cases, fun fact, settlement on most chains is super slow with X402 because block times are actually way slower than everyone says they are. Your chain could be 250 milliseconds. I guarantee it's going to take like 1 to 2 seconds for that settlement to come in. Most, at least my experience. And so for us, it actually doesn't have a huge impact because our block times are as well pretty fast. But it means that settlement success does have to technically wait for an additional block because the transfer doesn't occur right away. So again, just kind of breaking that down, but I'm super pumped to work with you and see how we can, bring this as a set of plugins to Farameter because I think it's going to be, the end goal is to bring this to agents, right? We want agents to be able to move money the same way humans do, and obviously humans as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, it makes total sense, right? The settlement time thing I think has been understated, like you said, so badly that I think that people are realizing they have to do session-oriented, create, interact, wait, then pull for results, which is kind of a funny, we're kind of back to a lot of the I'm going to top up my local wallet because it's the only way I can get performance out of this thing. We've done something. We've got a new payment scheme called Flex that we're working on, and it ties into some of the stuff you're talking about. Some of the stuff that's kind of orthogonal would be really cool to see if there was some overlap. But a big part of it is, when do you make a payment as an agent? How long do you have to wait for the response? If the agent's making micropayments, how much eventual consistency do you tolerate? How much, kind of potential failed payments do you tolerate? Overspend do you tolerate? There's a ton of interesting work there and I think what it'll come down to is on the same chain, let's say Scale or Solana or whatever, there will be different methodologies of payment that are completely policy driven and related to the thing being paid for. I personally, if I ran a weather server, I don't care if maybe 1 in 100,000 or 1 in 10,000 transactions overspends for what the escrow account would have if I can give them data right away. It's no skin off my back, it's no problem, right? Whereas if you're doing some type of massive payment, like you're buying an art piece or you're doing, something for, buying automotive parts or something, then you really care I need to actually make sure this goes through, right? Or whatever.
Definitely.
So it kind of depends on where you're willing to tolerate, how quickly you need to deliver the actual work. So there's a lot of room for that. So, I think we're on kind of a really kind of fun edge of where being flexible, having good policy control allows for all these different use cases to be working within the same mechanic. And really the mechanic is what's annoying to build. It's the headers, it's the body, it's the responses, all this stuff. Adding the schemes on top, adding new payment methodologies is the fun stuff. It's once the framework's there.
Definitely. No, I'm with you there. And it's actually maybe kind of good crossover with both of our kind of core things right now, which is, we've obviously got all of our privacy stuff. You have Farameter, which is growing very quickly. We're seeing a ton of new developers pick it up, which is super exciting. And obviously your new Flex scheme. Something just in general that I fully agree with, and I think we're at this interesting experimental point in time where there's been a lot of talk recently about how agents are going to make payments. And I've been writing about this a lot. And, my belief is, credit cards are never going to go away. They're ingrained in most, first world financial societies. And that's fine, right? There's no issue with that. Saying that an agent is not ever going to be given a credit card is unrealistic. I think the annoying part is agents need guardrails first and foremost. And defining guardrails with stablecoins is functionally a lot easier, because the part that I think everyone continues to forget is that blockchains are really stinking good at this. Like they are at the end of the day. And I think there's, it's kind of funny because blockchain has forever been this weird, I think, technical trade-off for people where they think they can only use it for very certain things and everything else has to be off-chain. And people forget that you could just write this logic on-chain and it works. There's a reason people don't do this on Ethereum, because it's really expensive. But could you do it on Scale? Could you do it on Solana? Could you do it on Base? Absolutely. And then you're like, that's not going to break, right? Your agent is not going to accidentally overwrite logic that is by default immutable. Although maybe not so much on Solana, because they do have, I think, more mutability. But at least on the EVM, it's a little bit harder to do that. But I digress. The part that I'm actually more interested in here, which I love that you bring up, is what agents are paying for. Because this has started to become a little bit of a heated discussion where we're seeing some bigger thought leaders in the space, some VCs, research teams, stuff like that, kind of come in and say, hey, this agentic economy stuff is really cool, but there's really not necessarily a ton of value in my agent using stable coins for really large payments. And there's not value in my agents using credit cards for really small payments. And when is my agent going to do one or the other? What's more valuable? And I just think it's a really interesting, it's really interesting to me, because something that V2 has, the X402 V2 spec has, that no one has yet done from my knowledge, is it can take other forms of payment that are not stablecoins. It's not actually defined how to do it per se, but it is theoretically capable of it. Eric made sure of that in his kind of like driving of the second iteration. Yeah. So I'm just curious if that's come up at all with, as you guys are building, Parameter.
Yeah, not to jab, but it was possible in V1 too. It's just you had to properly implement it, which was a tough one for a lot of people. Yeah, I mean, I know you teed me up well on that. I think that the asset differentiation and also just the mechanics, right? Like sometimes you can represent, like we're currently, Solana's got a couple token standards, and I'm gonna speak about Solana because I know it best, but it's got a couple token standards. One's supported well and one's barely supported at all. But the mechanics for sending them, receiving them are all identical, right? But when you're talking about potential alternatives, assets that maybe have slightly different interaction methodologies, yeah, you really need to kind of figure out, do they fit into the existing schemes, or can you extend, like you can add new ones, right? Yeah, there's a lot of research work that can be done there really easily with kind of the current infrastructure, which is cool. But I don't think a lot of it's been done yet. Like you said, it's like there's there's a lot of stuff with like, you look at the Circle guys, what they're doing. You look at some of the stuff people are doing with like effectively tokens over X402, where they're not even they're putting it on chain, but it's private chain, but it allows the mechanic to work. Like there's tons of stuff that you can do there, and keeping it flexible and making it so you could potentially tilt up a facilitator that is capable of handling N of these different schemes quite easily becomes a huge boost in your ability to like adapt, right? Which is what I'm all about, pragmatically adapting to the problem.
Definitely. No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I feel like it's interesting, right? Because, so much of it is driven by humans. We're not yet at the point, I think, where we're seeing agents drive that decision-making. There's been a lot of exploration, over the last 6 to 9 months about agents being very capable at solving, impossible math problems or science and research problems, things that have been stuck or nothing new's been done in, 50, 60, 70, 100, 200 years. And now LLMs are actually capable, or not LLMs by themselves, agentic loops that are capable of really high reasoning are now solving problems and coming up with new, literally like they're creating new forms of viable solution. And so I think what's really exciting is I think we're kind of at that point where there's a lot of room for experimentation and growth. And kind of back to one of the first things I said, what I do believe is really exciting is that we have some big players involved, right? I think it's not as relevant if you don't have Stripe involved, you don't have Visa involved, you don't have Google involved, you don't have Coinbase involved. these are companies with huge reserves of research and personnel that actually can implement these things fairly, I mean, at this point, actually fairly quickly. I thought Stripe was going to take a lot longer. Props to them. I tested out their machine payments last week, and it was pretty good. It's not like anything game changing per se, but like the seamlessness of how it implemented into their existing product, like, was good. For teams that need a high level of compliance and proper auditing and tracking for taking payments and all that good stuff. Like, it's a good solution. And so, I think coming back to the kind of piece that led us down this track, as agents start to pay for more things, I think it's great that we have multiple ways for them to pay. But like, again, I do think there's a situation where you may want to give it a credit card with guardrails, which I still kind of feel like is more a debit card with limits, but that's just me. Versus stable coins. I am curious if you think we'll see any, like, I don't know, is it possible that we see a net new primitive that doesn't exist yet? Is the issue not on the actual payment method? Is the issue on real world tie-in? Like, if an agent needs to buy something, right? We saw like 8183, ERC 8183 come out from the Ethereum Foundation and Virtuals last week. Do we need more like middleman protocols to help just facilitate information? Is that more relevant, do you think, in the short term? Just curious if you have any, like, this is that thing that I think I'm missing, or you think you see is missing.
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I could talk about this for a long time. Because it's an interesting problem, right? Like, one of the things I see, and I'm not sure that this is the solution, but I definitely see the issue is, wallet management across a distributed organization. Doesn't matter if it's agent clusters or a big org. Right now in the crypto space isn't as fluid as you'd like it to be if you were maybe orchestrating, like, let's say 1,000 agents. Where do they, like, you could build, and if anyone wants to do this, let me know, because I don't have enough time, but you could build a really, really crazy agent-related, policy-driven faucet system. Effectively, you could have trickle-down trees or even graphs of this agent distribution across wallets, combined with basically agents requesting that things get paid for and then getting, kind of confirmation, so they're not directly interacting with the wallet, data. This stuff is very clearly needed. What it'll shake out as far as the actual implementation, I'm not sure. But I definitely see a world where agents are told what their limits are in some type of contextual information that they get. They're able to request payments are made without needing to have private keys. It doesn't matter if they're smart wallets or whatever. They're able to ask for distribution of funds for certain use cases with policy controls. This all has to exist. But the cool thing about it is it's actually easy to reason, because if you just look at any large enterprise, this is the exact same problem they have to deal with. These guys deal with petty cash and distribution. I mean, look at Ramp. Like, the entire thing's built around making this automated. This isn't a new problem. What it is it'll be interesting to see what the edge is between the agent and that interface of this infrastructure. But this is a very well-known, well-understood, you have people with agency making actions with money from an org. How do you do that? How do you deal with it?
Yeah, it's such a great call out, and it's arguably so dumb simple. But I think it calls out maybe the top 2 to 3 biggest points of friction, ironically, are still the same thing for the blockchain industry, which is getting money in still kind of is not easy per se. There's a lot of great companies, and I know, like, I will always give credits due. I think the Solana ecosystem has done an incredible job of this over the last 6 to 8 months. There's so many new teams building in this kind of like direction of, we need to make the 0 to 1 of getting on chain easier. Don't love the fact that there's so many people kind of proxying themselves as neobanks, but I like the fact that there's a lot of people trying to solve this problem of getting money into a usable wallet is still an absolute nightmare. And I do think, there's a lot of great ramping companies, but if anyone's ever tried to put a credit card into a ramp, you tell me how many times it actually took for that to go through. I'm still probably like 2% on a couple hundred tries. It's not very good for someone living in the United States. So I do think like that is a severe problem because, again, coming back to this idea of, well, a business, right? If you're running a business and, I kind of believe in this world where agents will open up new jobs, right? Like, yes, are we going to probably go through this period of like lots of people will potentially get transitioned into either no work or other roles, probably in certain industries where it's easier to let agents do things. But I do believe at the end of the day, like human CYA and like human sign off is going to be critical. And so I think, it's more realistic that that person who sits at a desk and pushes papers for 8 hours a day, they might just have a team of 5 or 10 agents that they're now managing, and they're 10x more effective. And this business is now 10x more effective. Like I do see at a point that happening, because if we just fire everyone, then like, let's be honest, that's not going to be fun for society. But anyways, I digress on that. What I'm actually getting at is if this person needs to, approve payments and do all these things, and part of that is letting the agents have agency over that. To your point, like that average, John Doe or Jane Smith working at, the average person in the world still does not know what a crypto wallet looks like. They don't know what an address looks like. They don't care what a stable coin is. They don't care what an on-ramp is. All of that still needs to be abstracted. And so I think there's that like level 1 that we have to fix. And then as we get deeper, to your point, like how do we do wallets and guardrails in a good way? There's a couple teams working on this right now. And I mean, props to them. They're in a very tough kind of spot, I think, because you kind of need a real organization, I think, to make it viable. I think letting like a tech entrepreneur have 20 agents and delegate out payments is great. But at the end of the day, like, I don't think that's your end customer. I think your end customer is an established company who's been around for a long time. If you can get them using agents making payments, I think you've really broken through a threshold that brings agentic commerce to the next level. Just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that, I mean, look at it this way. If Ramp tomorrow woke up and said, hey, we're building out an agentic version of all the workflows we've already built, right? Let's just say hypothetically they could make it work, right? A lot of the infrastructure they've spent all this time building really, really works well with the kind of, policy and guardrails and, having understanding of what your organizational shape is and all that stuff. I think a big place there's going to be a problem is going to be the rate of policy decisions and how you what the actual quantizing is of the policy decision, how much you let out, right? So like a really good issue for us, right? Going back to Flex for a second, because it kind of ties in, is we're at a place now where we want agents to be able to pay for their own inference with crypto. Like basically be able to say, look, I'm coming in, I need this inference done. I want this LLM to be able to generate this response, whatever. Here's what I've got is in my wallet, right? My allowed wallet. I want to pay this much, this much, this much, this much, and I want it to be fast because I'm an agent. I need to be able to interact with these data sources, right? Or it could be, historical data on wine growing in France because I'm trying to build a real estate agent that needs to reach out, right? The thing with X402 is we don't really have quick responses with low millisecond like turnaround on getting data back, which means for an agentic workflow, it sucks. Like you're just like, okay, I'm gonna wait, right? And not to mention there are cases like with inference where you don't know how long it's gonna potentially be. You want tokens, right? And it maybe will cost you more, but maybe you've got some flexibility on the policy for how negative you go in your balance and all that. These things are all gonna get combined together where you're gonna want Web 2 style, like low latency increase in order to facilitate payment. You're not going to be able to deal with 2-second turnarounds on, the chain response. And also the policy's got to be quickly decided on whether or not something can be paid through or not. So it's this interesting convergence of like, how do we bring down latency on the actual payment? How do we make sure that we're fast enough on the policy decisions? Maybe we set up, allowances and in escrow and that type of thing. But there's a lot of like weird knobs that are going to get turned that I think will get figured out as people use this more and more.
Definitely. No, I agree with you there. And I think that's it's funny. There's a chicken and egg when you're building an agent that makes payments, which is the agent itself requires an LLM. But in every case I've ever seen, that base LLM can't yet run off of X402, right? Because it has to be running constantly. And so I still like my thesis on like agentic or agents that are more autonomous is, I think in an ideal world, every agent runs on a state-of-the-art model and is running off of OpenAI or Anthropic or XAI or Google. But in reality, we don't have enough money to do that. It's too expensive. Paying $15 for a million token output, which is like what, an 80-page book or something, seems like a lot, but like when you start to see these things reason and make good decisions, it adds up way too fast. And so what we actually have is a lot of people using like OpenRouter free tier or Minimax 2 or like cheap GLM or Kimi models, which Kimi is actually a monster. So I mean, honestly, props to them. But all these models are like pretty good, but they're not as good, I've found, when you start to get into the decision-making loop around running an agent. Like OpenAI, Anthropic, like the top frontier models have the best bank, like pound for pound output. And so what I think will become really interesting is when we start to see people realize this, people start to run the core agentic loop on a way cheaper model, and they start to just delegate everything out, right? So the only thing the core agent loop is doing is literally delegating tasks out, almost like sub agents and sub tools constantly. And because it's so cheap to run, you can, if you need to call a real estate agent, or you need to call a shopping agent or a trading agent or like whatever it is, you're willing to pay for that inference because you're saving so much on the core agent that's just running nonstop, and you can pay a higher premium for that. But then to your point, it needs to be fast. You don't want your agent just sitting there waiting constantly because, well, it's wasting time. Time is money. So yeah, I don't very, very much so agree with you though. The speed of this is becoming a really interesting question, especially with these high reasoning models, because the thinking mode and the agent mode are great, but they're also really slow, and we like things fast. Anyone else use ChatGPT Instant all the time, even though they tell you to use thinking mode?
But yeah, sorry, to that point, my North Star for a lot of the stuff we're doing is what would it take to build infrastructure that would allow for an agent to boot and pay for its own inference with X402 in a way that doesn't actually kill the functionality of the agent. That's just the North Star. It's not there yet. And really, it isn't even X402 specific so much as just being able to say, look, if I booted an agent and I needed to pay for it and I wanted to use, no API keys, full pay-as-you-go type situation, like what would it have to look like? And that's influenced a lot of the architecture we're building. It's influencing a lot of the future projects we've got kind of starting to pop up in our roadmap, and some of the stuff that you guys, been talking about already that we're about to release. So it's a huge thing.
Love it. No, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think that is a fantastic North Star. And I mean, in theory, it's actually not that hard to do, right? You're more so putting in a private key and like almost a pre-hook, right? It's like, hey, you have to use this before the agent loop starts and then dynamically seed it. I think the part that gets, really complicated so far for me at least is agentic wallets, which is a whole different rabbit hole. Yes, you can give it a private key. However, giving a self-manipulating agent a private key so far has been an awful idea.
Yeah, what could go wrong? What could go wrong, sorry?
Yeah. Well, everything and nothing, I guess, is kind of the good answer there. I've been playing with a lot of agentic wallets. I've gotten a lot of people asking me, hey, what's the difference between an agentic wallet and a normal wallet? The answer is honestly pretty much nothing, except for the fact that an agentic wallet is more so just capable of being called in a way that an agent natively can, right? So not sure if you guys have had any teams playing around with that with Parameter, but so far I've tried a few decent ones. It's definitely a growing piece to this. But I do think that's where maybe the limitation has started to come in, and why maybe we're seeing a resurgence in agent cards is because I think agentic, let's be honest, there's like less than 5 good wallets in blockchain. Phantom set the standard. No questions asked. Phantom has probably arguably always been the best or one of the best wallets. I think. I don't know, maybe you've got some other opinions, but like there's really not that many good wallets. Most of the existing wallets are super buggy and super bloated. And so I think with agentic wallets, it's really hard because they're all based on the same 3 providers right now. Every agentic wallet is pretty much Privy, Coinbase embedded wallets, or CrossNet embedded wallets behind the scenes, which isn't a bad thing, but they all then have the same limitations of guardrails are a little tricky, hooks are tricky, you're kind of tied into a third party. So yeah, maybe you've got some thoughts there to tie up this this train of thought.
Yeah, well, there's a big meta problem there too, right? So like, let's say that you're in a world where you are with, especially in like the Solana case, where you don't have access to the private key, right? Just that's the reality you live in. That's a good thing. You can't use exact as it currently exists inside X402 because you can't sign the transaction to pay for it because you don't have it, you can't partially sign it to then send it, right? So that's going to be the new normal, is not having access to kind of secrets. The squad's multi-sig is a really good example on Solana of that being well done. I think it powers some of the examples you mentioned. I won't name names, but like the way that works is you don't have access to critical pieces you shouldn't. It is all programmatic. So how does that make it work? So that's, again, with Flex, that's a big reason we pushed the architecture the way we did. Is effectively the agent in this case can generate a session key to use against an escrow account that's been funded, but it can't directly sign anything. It doesn't have any access to the escrow itself. In the case of like, one of the wallets you're talking about. And I think that programmatic wallets and agent-driven programmatic wallets are going to become the new normal. I think it's just going to be how it goes, and I'm happy about it. I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah.
So.
No, I agree fully. I think a big part, and I do think like Squad was a great call out. Some of the coolest wallet tech in the space. They've got so much they've been building. I think one of the really interesting things, and I mean, we're seeing, I think probably the best example today is Ampersand from Edge and Node, of a team trying to create an agentic wallet with a human interface. I haven't really seen anyone else pick that up, which is honestly surprising. So I think they're thinking in the right direction of, if humans are going to manage this, how do humans then create this kind of trickle down effect throughout an organization? So I kind of expect that to be the direction and trend that people go. But I agree. I think if we can make creating an agentic wallet way easier than having to go to a website and copying a command and then hoping that it finds the right OpenClaw package and then figuring out how to pre-fund it. If we can kind of take care of all that and just make that like a 5-second click a button, start a process, and then it's done, and then it's hooked up to your discovery and your API abstraction and guardrails and all that, I do think we'll make a huge step forward with downstream X402 payments, agent registration, identity. Like I think it's all kind of interconnected. So I do think that's a big missing piece right now for me. So I like your thoughts there. I talked way too much today. I'm sorry. I know we're almost at time here, or we're about at time. Melkor, I will let you ask Mr. Guy here one last question of your choice related to anything you think is relevant, agentic commerce, Parameter, Corbits, and then I will say less than 5 words to close things out.
Okay. In your opinion, do you think, because I feel like as private and confidential transactions come more into place, people are going to have to choose between whether doing confidential or non-confidential transactions, right? So you're going to have 2 options. In your opinion, do you think the majority of people are going to go down confidential or non-confidential?
I think they'll do whatever is easiest and presented to them. I think that if you create a situation, especially certain cases where you as a business, it behooves you to provide an easy way to do confidential, then people will use it because it's easy. And then you can help guide them towards a solution. But I think based on the way I've seen things, I mean, you look at the US, right? We still don't have chip and pin. We're still chip and signature.
Seriously?
Yep. It ain't
We got it
changing
like
anytime
30
soon.
years ago.
It ain't changing anytime soon. So that's just reality. So yeah, I think people will go with what's easy, and I think it's up to us to help them. And also, when people understand it, when they're educated on the implications of their choices, I think they'll make the right choice if you give them an opportunity. So
That's mind blowing. Sawyer, close us out. Five words.
Corbits, parameter, scale is awesome.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Scale School. Shout out Alexander. Thank you so much for joining us. You know, it's always fun when the Corbits guys, you know, you guys come down and we get to talk the talk. Sawyer, go rest your voice, my friend. I call him my little Yaposaurus. He's my Yaposaurus Rex.
He's never once called.
Thank you guys. I am from now on. Thank you guys so much for joining us. And we will see you again next week. Goodbye.